Welcome to today's episode of Learning Unboxed. I am, as always, extremely excited about the conversation that we're going to be able to have today because we're going to be talking about something called the WOSU Classroom. And joining us today is Amy Palermo, who is the Chief of Content for Education at WOSU Public Media, where she leads a team of educators dedicated to helping children learn. And Amy began her educational career in Texas, where she perfected the poetic application of y'all, near and dear to my heart, also growing up in Texas, and developed a love of sweet tea, so not me. But Amy, we're going to take you anyway, despite your penchant.
You're so kind. You're so kind.
So thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So another little bit of context for our listeners. So Amy was also a middle school language arts teacher. She wore lots of those teacher hats, like yearbook advisor, elementary school curriculum specialist, so on and so forth, and all of which I'm sure has influenced sort of the way she takes on her role at WOSU, in particular her role of thinking about and leading some of the work with the WOSU Classroom. And so Amy, for our listeners, let's first and foremost start with sort of the 100,000-foot view about what give folks who don't know, because our listeners come from all over the world. First and foremost, WOSU, what the heck is that?
So WOSU is a public media station. So we have radio stations, TV stations, we do all sorts of broadcasts, digital, and then we have Classroom. And Classroom is my department. So kind of the big view on that is education. We take kids from birth through 12th grade, and we have programs all along the way for kids, for caregivers, for families, for teachers. It's our goal to affect that kid from as many angles as we can and to have as many learning touch points as we can. So we're kind of that holistic organization of lifelong learners, and Classroom narrows in on the student.
And so how long, because many public television, radio stations in and around the world, have a variety of different sort of program lenses and opportunities, things that they feel like are really important. And one of the long-standing tenets of public broadcast is that although, yes, we all compete with each other for our listeners or our viewers, however you want to sort of think about that, we also try to be very complementary and to work very collaboratively and to have programming that's unique to us because, we're trying to fill great needs in our community. And I would argue that the WOSU Classroom in particular is really designed and suited to some pretty robust needs that happen in our local region. So talk with us just a little bit, Amy, about sort of the need, right, that this project fills, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts about how you actually accomplish the work that you do.
Sure. So we look at need from several lenses, but I think our goal, number one, as you stated, is to listen to the community. And our community, we've got several different audiences when we're talking about the needs of families and the needs of educators. So we do that several ways. We've got advisory committees and a board there at WOSU that helps, and just a whole network of caregivers that we listen to. So I'm a teacher at heart. Mm-hmm. I live, and my whole team does, to help others learn. And it's really important to us that whatever services we provide are needed and are equitable. I think that's another big one for us. And we're well positioned to complement any organization. So we have this huge service area. We have digital services that are around everywhere. We're a team of 5. So our kind of philosophy is to pair our expertise with the expertise of others, be it other organizations or others in the community, to kind of maximize those opportunities for our families and students and educators.
Right. And I think that folks oftentimes forget, right, that in the midst of the day-to-day, what we think of as sort of a traditional school-based learning, right? And let's set that piece aside for a moment. You and I have had conversations about this notion of traditional learning, I know, over the years. But what I'm really trying to get at is the fact that I think that there's a fair number of folks that forget that it is very common, right, for families and children to engage in non-school based or traditional based content media from a variety of sources. And so today, of course, some of that comes from the web, it comes from streaming, it comes from apps, and all of those sorts of components actually are part of the ecosystem, right? As public broadcasting in particular is evolving, right? And so you're filling a need, and you're also filling a gap, because the reality is that even though we may fundamentally say, oh my gosh, we need kids out in the world, the reality is kids still spend a tremendous amount of time absorbing and getting content from these types of sources. So you are filling a need.
Yeah, and we're very intentional. Very intentional. You have our public broadcasting. We've got our television programming, which is also available now everywhere, streaming, you can get on the website. So it's programming that is fun, but it's also very intentional and very targeted at specific learning standards. So we're really trying to put learning, I say we hide it, it's secret. Sometimes it's not, but it's everywhere. And we look at it from different angles. So within the family unit, so our families, we spend a lot of time together. We're in the car together, running around the house, cooking dinner. Like, what are those maybe unintentional opportunities to learn? So our programming is really looking at, I'll call it non-traditional learning, but we do it all the time. We just kind of shine a light on it or give you ideas on how to improve or just make it more intentional.
And I would also argue, you didn't say this, but having been a consumer for most of my life of some of this type of content as well, I would also say one of the things that you do and you do really well is you make that content extremely engaging, right? So yes, it's intentional, but as the consumer, I may not know and I may not care. What I know and care about is, oh my gosh, I can't not watch or listen to this thing because it's so intriguing to me, and my kids love it, right?
Yes, and there's so much thought that goes behind that. We know from research that that's our number one priority. If our learner, I'll leave it very general, be it student or adult or family member, parent, grandparent, if they're not engaged, if what we're doing isn't interesting, if it's not fun, then we've wasted a big portion of that opportunity to make an impact. So absolutely, and thank you for bringing that up, because it's really important. We have fun at our job. We love it. And if we deliver some sort of event or training or activity that is not 100% engaging, then we've really missed the mark. So that's really, it's kind of that low hanging fruit, but you got to work hard to hit it.
You do. And so let's talk a little bit about working hard to hit it, because we are, fingers crossed for all of us, right, coming in on the flip side of one of those events that happens on a global scale that you can prepare all you want and suddenly it's here, and life as you know it suddenly doesn't work that way anymore. And there is no question from a global perspective that this pandemic that we've all been working our way through has been a huge disruptor to education. right? So no matter where you are, what part of the planet, sort of where you were when your academic cycle, we're hearing from all over that there are deep and great concerns about how we go back. But I would preface, let's not go back to what was, but let's go back to a new opportunity, whole nother conversation. But the reason I bring that up is because, like so many educational organizations, institutions, endeavors, the WSU Classroom had to pivot. That's one piece. But more importantly, I guess the stress behind my question is, had the opportunity to pivot and do some quite remarkable things on behalf of our community as a result. So let's talk about some of those things that suddenly you and the programming and the team were able to do at a time that was really, really tough.
Yeah. So I want to give a little background before we jump into how we pivoted. A big portion of our services revolve around educational technology. So we do a large amount of training for educators on how to use technology to improve learning. And this is something that we've done for years and we love and we're very passionate about. Technology can help level the playing field for different types of learners, different disabilities. It can personalize learning. I mean, another show, I'm sure I could talk to you for hours, but technology is amazing, but it's also very scary. So pre-pandemic, we offered these services very successfully, but it was typically kind of those outliers that really wanted to jump in and try something new. So we had all of these processes in place. And when the pandemic hit, everything changed. Just kind of clear the table and start over. So we were able to, first of all, our television programming switched. It's always educational. So that didn't change, but we added programming to hit different age groups because it was very important for us. One, that everyone had access to learning when they were out of school, but also because families needed that opportunity. They need a breath. They need something that's structured. And then, with support materials online for those that could access it, educators could do more. So that is one of the pivots. But the other was just all virtual training, which is easy to say and simple to say, but it really takes a redesign of curriculum. So it's a pretty intense process. But what a cool opportunity to go into people's homes. Talk about a different learning environment and a different way to engage learners, from kids to adults. So I will say that's probably my favorite part of all of this, is how it's a different type of connection with someone when you get to be in their home with them. It's just a neat opportunity. And one of the things that we changed was our family and community learning. So we have this program. We take a group of, it's a small group, usually 6 families at a time. And they traditionally would come in, and we have these different activities, and it's a month-long program. Well, we changed it to virtual. And this is hopefully one of the things that I hope never changes, because we got to learn with our families in their home, in their environment. We talk about it and practice it, but it's different when it's in the home, and it makes it so much easier for the entire family to participate. We all have crazy schedules, and being able to take any significant amount of time out can be difficult. So that's one of those things that needs to stay. It's just a nice way to interact with people when distance is a concern, especially in our rural communities, or economically. Sometimes it's challenging with a parent that is out of the home working. So anyway, that's one of the fabulous things that we have grown accustomed to that I hope stays. And we have to work at it. I think that's my greatest hope, because we have made so many advances in education and personalizing our learning and giving students different creative outlets to express what they've learned. And there's a lot of advantages there, but it won't just happen.
Right.
We have to be intentional about it to keep it going.
Yeah, we do. And we also have to be very, very thoughtful about the components that we keep, the components that we choose not to keep, and more importantly, the components that we keep and we modify, and understand why we've made the choices that we have. So I want to dig into that just a little bit, because, one of the things that I was really excited about this conversation today is because, I have had numerous conversations over the last 12 months or so as we've been rolling through the pandemic with a lot of local schools, school districts, and a lot of families, because we've been heavily involved in a statewide listening tour where we've just been really talking with folks about their experiences. And one of the intriguing pieces that has come up on several occasions, as we're all very aware, one of the things that came, certainly at least in the United States, I'll preface it with that, the lack or the inequities tied to just basic services, broadband, internet access, was really brought to the forefront. It's a conversation we've been having nationally for, quite frankly, a really long time. And everybody's like, yeah, we should do something about that. And yet we didn't ahead of this. But now, there's massive ramping up that's happening. And as all of that is sort of playing out, one of the things that families found themselves, quite frankly, relying on is the fact that there was some content for those families who couldn't get to the internet. Maybe they had access to television, maybe they could get themselves to a facility or a library or something that managed to stay open in their community, right? And they could sit down and still consume content that was of high quality.
Yeah.
And families talked about how comforting that was. How does that make you feel?
Yeah. I can think back on my own childhood about PBS programming and the characters that impacted my life, and that still exists. So you are absolutely right. The quality and the comfort level, especially in a time of trauma, is it can never be valued enough for our kids. And I also think because of access to the internet, even if it is not instantaneous, because there are touch points or smartphones, or there's so much support material for the trauma. I will say that's one of the things that we really focused on. So you'll see new programming in your traditional, in your, the series that your kids all love. You'll see programming coming out that addresses the specific needs and topics relevant to the current times. So it's not out of reach, and it gives parents a really easy kind of model to start those conversations and explore some of those kind of hard times. And then also the opportunity to move on and have some sense of normalcy as well. Right. So that programming is priceless. And the fact that it now is available in so many different formats just makes it that much more accessible. But it is really important to us. I will say accessibility. We do a lot of grant work to bring all of these services into communities that may not traditionally have access to it. So, it is something that we really work on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to circle back around on something that you said earlier, around what decisions now are being made about what do we keep, right? So in addition to new content that we created, new accessibility, you also offered up office hours, you created new support materials, as you've indicated, and content curriculum to go with the programming that either you already had or was new. So there was a huge lift, quite frankly. I mean, let's just be really clear. Your team lifted. And so my question, and we saw that happening all over the planet. When you really start to dig, there was, it was funny because on the one hand, right, when all this first started, everybody started immediately, what do I have that I could transition really quickly because everybody's scrambling, there's a need. And then all of a sudden we were flooded as educators, right, as consumers, as families with just gads of content. And now we're suddenly struggling with, well, what's good content versus just something that might be fun, but is it really going to get me what I need? And certainly schools and teachers very overwhelmed, both by the lift that they had to make, but also then this dearth of content that was coming out. So at the end of the day, we understand that's the ecosystem that we survived through. And we've come out on the other side, and now we collectively as a planet have a lot of decisions to make. So as Amy Palermo, head of, WOSU Classroom in that ecosystem, what are the pieces that you find so valuable that you cannot let them go? And I know it's kind of a loaded question because there may be a lot of internal decisions that haven't been made yet. And I totally, full disclosure, not to put you on the spot, but to really ask, how do you decide? Because that's the heart of really my question, not just the what, but the how, because I'm a classroom teacher facing the same thing, and I may or may not have a huge support system around me, right? I may just be making do. And yet in my own classroom, I have to make these same decisions.
Yep, absolutely. So I will tell you, that I can go over a few things.
Sure.
So educational programming stays. That is always on our TV channels. And that'll never go away. That's kind of the heart of what we're doing. We have shifted. What we have found is that our early learners are the greatest consumers of that broadcast.
So our littles, right? That pre, what, say 3, 4 through what, 4, 5 grade level?
I would take grade level, yes. Up through maybe 5th or 6th grade. So we have a lot of content for them that's broadcast. It's everywhere digitally too.
Right.
We have for our older learners, our focus is online and supporting that through streaming. And then we have PBS Learning Media, which is our just fabulous database of content. I call it a database. You can search for anything.
Sure. Yeah.
But it has programming for educators. It's got games for kids. It's got suggestions for parents. It's just a great place to go for that kind of content. Two programs in particular that we're keeping that I have loved, and I mentioned already, are family and community learning. Learning together is at the heart of what we do, and we're forced to do that in the pandemic, and it left parents very stressed, wanting to meet the needs of their kids, but not knowing how. So that focus is not going away. We started a newsletter in the pandemic and are continuing that, that gives parents ideas, just short, quick little things that they can do with their kids. And then our family and community learning, we've kind of transitioned that model into several different programs. And one example is our summer camps. So we have a fabulous series of summer camps where kids and families with their families meet with us virtually for an hour each day for 4 days. And it's just fun. It's just pure fun in the home, and everyone can participate. So that's one of the things that we're keeping. The other thing that we're keeping is our virtual professional learning for educators, and that's called Teacher Campus. So we partnered with CET, PBS, and SOIDA, and they are organizations in Southwestern Ohio. one of the things that we learned, obviously, we need to work together. The more we can work together, the more we can do for our constituents.
Yep.
So we built this amazing platform, teachercampus.org, and it's professional development, and it's from all sorts of experts. And because we can do self-paced and synchronous courses, and we have more people working together to provide it, and we have educators that are now comfortable learning in that environment.
Right.
That's something we're going to keep. One of the struggles previously, it is very hard to learn new things in a new environment.
Right.
Anywhere, anybody, any adult, you go somewhere new, you have to get used to the surroundings and the distractions, and whoever's in front of you, you've got to find that connection. When you add technology on top of that to a person who isn't used to using it, it becomes a barrier to learning. And one fabulous thing that we have done is help lower that barrier to learning with technology.
Yeah.
And I'm just thrilled because it means I can help more people with those resources. So those are my favorite pieces that we will just fight and promote and encourage others to continue, because it's easy. And when you're in a familiar environment, just like in the home or online, it makes it very beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. And we're hearing a lot of those same things from the educators that we're working with very broadly, that those are some of the resources and the opportunities, and they do feel more comfortable, because the learning curve was steep, not for all, but as you and I well know, I originally met Amy, for our listeners, because of her role in helping educators with technology in particular, right? And so this is a real thing. The learning curve for some of these teachers was steep is not even the word. In the midst of a pandemic, you suddenly have no choice, and your entire world is upended, and it's stressful and it's overwhelming. And you do need to be able to take that moment and have that pause. So that gets me to my next question, which is a bit loaded, Amy, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I do want to keep this conversation real, because this is the heart of moving forward. You had these amazing, great successes and these wonderful programs, and you learned a lot that you're going to keep. But I have no doubt, knowing you as I do, there were things you learned that you said, we're not going to do it again, or it didn't work, or that was truly not the thing that we should be doing, or we could be doing, or maybe we could do it better. And so, without getting into the specifics, because I really didn't want to put you on the spot, but I know you learned some pretty valuable lessons, you and the team, as you progressed through getting to, again, my question about how do you decide, right? And some of how you decide was really thinking about the things that just didn't work. So share just a little bit with our listeners about a lesson or two in that space.
Sure. I'll start with saying that's what we do every day of every year, regardless. We just had a greater learning opportunity through the pandemic. We're constantly in search of new techniques and ways of sharing education that is helpful. I will say, we started off talking about engagement, and I'm going to circle right back to that, because even when I was in the classroom, I saw my role as a performer. When I was in front of those kids, if they weren't paying attention to me, that's my problem as the educator. And how can I change what I'm doing to engage them? So we had lots of lessons with engagement. One of the things we learned very quickly is that these are simple things, but are huge in interacting with someone via distance. You have to have your video on. You have to have access to audio, but how you structure curriculum. So you don't need to talk. As an instructor, we talk about in education, I'll kind of digress a little bit. In education, we talk about the importance of student involvement in their own learning, and that you can't just talk. You cannot just lecture indefinitely to
That
a
sage
class.
on the
It needs,
stage thing doesn't
yes,
work.
yes.
Yes.
So you need to keep it. Well, when you turn on a camera, it's a very easy to revert to that
Yes. Mhm.
because you don't have control of the environment that is distant of
Right.
your learners. And so we learned how to structure activities and give directions specific enough to trust our participants to engage, to follow those.
Mhm.
And the other thing that we learned was how to help those people rely on each other, whether it's family sharing things that they have learned or asking questions of the group, teachers, caregivers, whatever the situation is. It is difficult to take a step back and facilitate rather than instruct, I guess I will say. But it is a much more powerful learning experience. It's just much harder to do via distance. The other thing we learned is you can't do it all.
Right.
It's really hard because there's an opportunity for personalized learning in this environment, but it takes an enormous lift to have all of your resources available and organized and accessible. But on the timetable we're talking about, you can't do it all. So you have to prioritize those after you're exhausted trying to do it all. And you learn how to manage all of those different demands and put realistic expectations on you as the expert of whatever topic is going on. So I think those are probably our biggest lessons that we've learned and things that we will continue to focus on without you're so hard on yourself when you miss an opportunity or things don't go right. So you have to set realistic expectations too.
Yeah, absolutely. Both for yourself and for your learners, right? Because that's the other piece of the conversation here. It's not just so much the development and the delivery of the content. It's also how is that content, back to your point, the engagement piece, how is that content received? And how do I, on the fly, in a really difficult space, recognize that I'm not getting into the heart of my learners. And what do you do with that? Because that's a really tough thing. As an educator used to being in a classroom and having that personal connection and being able to visually see all of the body language, right? Not just the head that's in a little box, right?
Yeah.
How do educators moving forward manage that? Because the reality is, right, there are lots of families that loved virtual learning. They found that the benefits outweighed the cons for their particular circumstances, that there were an awful lot of learners that, oh my gosh, I've got to get them full-time back in school. And there's going to be a lot of space in the middle yet to be defined. We don't know what that's going to look like. So as teachers are getting ready, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, to go back in the fall, and for those who are deep in the trenches right now, and our Southern Hemisphere listeners, how do you manage that? How do you deal with that component?
So, and this is going back to the learning curve too. I like when you bring up not having access to body language and the simple chemistry that exists face to face. This is where you learn other techniques and using technology and giving your learner the opportunity to communicate. So it's a lift. You have to learn, but the nice thing is with these tools like chat, video recordings, different shared documents. When you give students different opportunities to communicate, you're going to hit them in a whole new way, which is really beautiful. Because when some students have an opportunity to respond in private, they may say things they would never say in class. And that's an opportunity traditionally we wouldn't have. The other thing that you get is kind of a opportunity for a new lens with disabilities.
Correct.
So while in the classroom, a student that is hard of hearing and does not want to admit it, that they need to be right by you, or you walk across the room and now they can't hear you because we're right here, there's a communication that's available to them that wasn't before.
Right.
So our there's so many examples with screen readers, with colored glasses. There's so many ways that technology helps different learners. So diverse set. So our challenge will be keeping those when we come back face to face, because that's a real opportunity that I would hate to miss. Another simple example is recordings. So if you record a lecture, a simple 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is, what an amazing opportunity for that student to be able to go back and listen, to turn on captions so they get it visually and audibly, or to adjust the speed to their own comfort and learning level. So these are, I think that I have digressed. I don't even remember what you asked me, but they're things that we have learned that I want our kids to have every opportunity. And I hope that these are some of the things that we can keep. So what did you ask me that I really need to answer?
No, you took us there. You took us on a journey. It was part of your story. It was beautiful and wonderful. And thank you. I always love to end this program with the question that I asked. It's just recognizing that there are folks out there in the trenches, in the field, trying to do the very best they can on behalf of all the amazing learners, whether they be in a traditional classroom, in an informal setting, or just out in the community, with families and friends. And so I appreciate so much, Amy, that you made time to join us today and to be part of this conversation about the amazingly wonderful things that are happening in the world of transformative education. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And we just say, keep learning.
Absolutely.
That's the secret.
Keep learning.
Keep learning.
Lifelong.
That's right.